All right, I don't know if somebody was trolling me or not, but they wanted to see how you hold a micrometer. Now, the whole thing is when someone's interviewing you and they want to know, do you know how to use a micrometer? Besides learning how to read the scale, it's how you handle the micrometer. You want to pick it up in such a way you're not going to lose control of the tool and drop it. That's what they're really looking for. Now, you pick the tool up, you have full control of it, and depending on the size of the micrometer, you can put one finger in here or two fingers in there. All right. Now here's where you read it up in here, and I think it's 6,000ths per revolution, or it's weird. I don't remember. I don't use this anymore. This is a Starrett. This is my father's. He's got his clock number on there. He's got his name or his JCK, his initials in here on the back. I don't know if you can see it. And his clock number was 14 at the time. He was one of the first tool makers in Resistaflex when it first started. Then he went in World War II. They held his job open for him for when he came out. But this is a Starrett. This thing's very old. It might be 85 years old. I'll quick guess. I do still use it once in a while. But I bought my father a set of micrometers that went from, this is 1 inch to 6 inches. And my father had a habit, if he needed a tool at work and he needed a little bit more depth, he would have somebody grind. Let me make sure I'm in the frame. Some of his Starrett, they were Starrett or Brown and Sharp. I think that the set was a Brown and Sharp. And he had people grind this part in here so he could go deeper. And I said something to him. I bought him this set. And he said, well, I needed that for a special job. See, my father didn't like going to the tool room and putting up with the guy that ran the tool room because he was real religious. I got to meet him years later. After my father died, I met his son and then the guy. And he would always preach Jesus to my father and make my father crazy. So my father avoided the tool room. Now, this is what I bought my dad. I might have shown you this once before. This is a Mitutoyo. And my dad dropped his, Brown and Sharp. Let's just say it was a Brown and Sharp he dropped. And he broke it. And he couldn't send it back to get it. They had serial numbers on them. He bought it hot. And he couldn't send it back to get it fixed. He tried fixing it. It got worse. So he didn't have a calipers. And when he asked my mother for some money to buy new calipers, my mother said, I just gave you money for a set of calipers. And my father was all embarrassed. He said I dropped them. My dad, I have it too. In other words, my heart will skip a beat. Actually, my heart will actually stop. And for a moment, I lose, you'll see my hand, I lose control of my hand under certain conditions. And my father had it worse. And he would actually drop stuff out. I finally figured out what it was. But he also could catch the tool with his foot. He started doing that. But he kept saying he needed a set of calipers. So I went over, I worked in Radio Shack, Saddlebrook. I can actually remember that, Saddlebrook. And out on the end of the parking lot of the mall was a tool store. And I went in there, and the guy was, he showed me the Brown and Sharp. There were several brands. I can't think of the other name. Well, anyway, he said to me, look, he says, I want to tell you something. All the young guys are buying Mitutoyos. This one. This was $130. So, like I said, after a while, me and my father, we got along better. And I wanted to surprise him. So I bought him. These were the best calipers in there. Now, my father, I tell you, he had a habit of grinding stuff down. Let me show you. This is some of the stuff he would do that make me crazy. All right, let me move this a little faster. Wait, I got to undo this one, maybe that one. Okay. All right. Out of the back comes like a depth thing, and you can measure how deep this is. See, this is ground away. My father, I needed it for a special job. You don't do that to a tool. But he told me he didn't like to go to the tool room because of the guy. I actually know the guy's name. I met his son, and then I went with his son. I took him to a ham flea market, and his parents showed up with him. I won't go deep into the story, but they were real religious and they went everywhere together, and they were Jehovah's Witness. And my father ground this so he could do a certain job without going to the tool room. And then here, I don't know if you can see it. My father's name is on here, and it's done by a woman at the front office. I think I mentioned that once before. They had a woman, and I don't know if maybe you can see it now, but she had pretty good handwriting, and most of his tools that I sold, that I had bought for him, all had her handwriting of his name on the tools. And I showed the kid, and the kid didn't care. And it was a set of micrometers, like I said, 1 inch to 6 or 1 inch to 8, and brown and sharp, I believe. And they glistened. And they're in a felt-lined box. And the kid saw that and he goes, "Well, how much?" I said, $30. I said, I showed him my father had ground in places on the tool in order to fit it on a special job. The kid says, "I don't care. They're beautiful looking." So I went outside. I told you this once before. I went outside, and this kid had a van, and he had those gray boxes inside on the walls, and you pulled them out, and he had micrometers. He had boxes and boxes, and he said to me, "Look," he pulled one out and he showed you. He says, "These are so beautifully built. They were brown and sharp." Starrett. There's one other company. I can't think of it. It's the junkiest one. Well, anyway, maybe General Tool, something like that. But in other words, the Starrett and Brown and Sharp really make some really incredible stuff. Do I have a Brown and Sharp thing here? See, I'm making the mistake of trying to find a tool. This is a pin vise. I think I showed you this once before. This pin vise holds really tiny drills, so you can like start the hole. And this is a Starrett. All right, I believe it was Starrett. It's so well made, it's incredible. But this is one of a set. I found this in a company. I told you once before. I was cleaning the company out, and the guy says, "When you're up on the 3rd floor, try to figure out why that door is stuck." And I looked under rather than try to move the door, and this is what was under the door. They stuck this under the door so the door would stay open. I took this out and I took it home. Up until that point, I was giving him everything I found, and then I realized he was a hoarder. And then when he quit, or he moved out of the company, he didn't take any of his stuff with him. He was like a big baby, and I had to finish up the job. I was in there taking all the out of his factory. It was plexiglass. Now I'm going to forget the name of the company of plexiglass. Famous plastic company. Well, anyway, I had to clean that company out. And it was unbelievable. DuPont Plastics. And then it became a tube company. And then that closed down, and they wanted it all cleaned out. It was an all wood building, like a Thomas Edison building, with the special asbestos cement and the whole thing. But anyway, every time I find something, he would handle it, go ooh, ooh, like I was nuts. And then when he quit, he moved out of his office because someone bought the building, and he threw a pissy fit. And the guy that owned the building kept him because I said, "This guy knows where all the circuit breakers are." So he gave him an office in the building, even though he didn't work there anymore, and let him go there every day and play make-believe. He made believe he was still working there. But this was under the door, and I've used this. I won't say a million times, but probably 100,000. But when you handle, as soon as they watch you pick this thing up, and you have to have full control of this. You don't want to drop it. All right, and I believe you set it to zeros, and you can to this back screw. I think you can recalibrate. I never touched it, but this is. Oh, let me tell you another story about this. When I was little, I needed to glue 2 pieces of wood together, so I used this. This is actual one, and I didn't hurt it. I didn't over tighten, and my father used to rage on over the years about how I used his micrometer. And this isn't really, anyway, this is one of his junkier ones. And I kept it sort of for that reason. But he would rage on about how I mistreated the tool. And then when I saw what he did to the tools I bought him, how he ground them down, he did have a reason. He says, I hate the guy at the tool thing. A religious guy. He says, every time I go up there to the tool, I don't think he was talking Jesus though. He was now I'm gonna forget, a Jehovah's Witness. And he started preaching to my father. And my father was a Methodist, but he didn't go to church anymore. So my dad would grind stuff down. And he'd say to me, well, I needed it for a special job. And I'm like, I didn't say to him, I paid $130 for this thing. What did I say, about $130? And the guy swore to me, he says, this will be the freaking cool tool. And my father said when he went in at work, they all had Brown and Sharp. And this at the time, the finish on this tool, these numbers are etched in here with acid. The quality of this work, this is made in Japan. This was better than the other ones. Just to, and he said, the guys at work really love the calipers, because he did let them use it. But when you picked up when they watch you, like they're hiring you, they watch how you handle tools. And because they don't want you dropping them, because they were expensive back in the old days. They still are, but most of the stuff's like made in China, something like this in mint condition in the box. I think you could still get $130 for it. But I just wanted to show you. Yeah, I linked the video to the guy that asked me how to hold this. But the whole thing is when they watch you pick it up, and an inspector does not hold it like this. You'd never do this on anything. This is how you do it. And you might pick the item up that you're trying to mic, and they're watching for that. They're watching for, like you're an inspector. An inspector holds this in his hand, and he mics it. And you might hold it different. The guy on the video, he's only got one finger down here, but it's a really long one, and it looks like the kind that ratchets. There's one when you tighten them down, when they bottom out, they click, and you could set that amount of torque. And they're for inspection. And oh man, I can't. I used go no-go gauges for a hole. I used to do aircraft instruments, cockpit instruments, and there was all kinds of tools just to measure the gap on something. And I had to learn go no-goes. They took me in a room and they taught me all this crazy stuff. Bearings, you wash your bearing out, you put it on this little tripod thing, or this little cone, and you spun it when there was no oil in the bearing at all. And you'd spin it, and in that little funnel or cone was a microphone. And you spun it and you look on the numbers, and it would tell you how much noise those bearings were making. And if it was below a certain level, you then put your oil in. We used to use a lot of P10, Pioneer 10. Spin it and then take the second reading. And if both readings were within spec, the bearings could be replaced. I had to do motors and synchros and actuators for aircraft. And every so many thousand hours, the instrument has to come in and be refurbished. That was the word, refurbished. And BER on something was beyond economical repair. AOG was aircraft on ground. We have contracts for certain instruments. The plane comes in and lands, and that instrument isn't working. They take the instrument out. They bring it over to West Orange and Thomas Edison Labs, and we repair it and get it back. A lot of times a taxi cab would be sitting outside waiting for it. And there's a whole bunch of stories I could tell you about that. But in other words, while the plane was on the ground, if it was losing any money, it was a certain amount of time, we had to turn that instrument around. If you didn't, they would get money back either on the contract for repair, or we had to pay them a fine for us not getting the thing back. So it wasn't beyond reason. No, it wasn't unheard of for me to have to stay 24 hours. And my boss, the Goldbrick, I used to call him, he's got all the letters from the companies telling him what a great employee he got. It was me. But he says, I'm going to keep this letter to show the kind of men that I commanded or whatever. He's a piece of idiot. He's the one that thought that my motors had pieces of metal in them, because they were 16 pole Some were, yes, always an even number. Some were 8 poles, some were 16. And after you magnetize the metal, it'd be the outer, it'd be the stator, be the outer shell of the motor. And after you magnetize it, when you put the armature in there, as you turn it, it would lock in certain at so many degrees because the magnet was so strong. You like stepping motors. If you ever had a stepping motor in your hand and you turn the armature, it's the same thing. And he kept saying, "There's something in the motor." Him and the other knucklehead's still alive. He goes as he's standing there. I should tell you his name, but he kept saying, "There's something." They opened the motors up. Then they went to the motor engineer, and he basically and then after lunch when they came back, they didn't want to know nothing about the motors. And I'm like, "Can I have them back?" And the guy, he died. He's Jack. Jack was sitting there. He needed 8 of these motors per aircraft instrument, and what it looked like was there was it was let's see, it would be fuel, pressure. There's 4 tapes that go up and down, and they look like thermometers, but they're cloth tapes, and there's a motor at each end working against each other, and there's servos in there and the whole thing. And you can't put the instrument back together if you're missing 2 motors. So he's sitting there, and he knows what they feel like, but he didn't speak up. And after that, Goldberg didn't want to talk about the motors anymore. He was wrong. He didn't know what he's doing. He came over from Bendix. He kept telling us how great he was over there. They laid thousands of people off to get to him, so they didn't have to bring him back. He kept telling the story. It was a woman. It was him. And I got to learn what the bullshit artists were like early on. But, I don't know. He'd come over to me. He was always smoking in my ear. He's not supposed to be smoking. And he just picks up a motor, starts turning the shaft. He says, "There's something in this motor." And I take it from him. I tell him, "No, that's not how it's supposed to be." He's telling me. All right. And then the lead tech comes over. "There's something in that motor." And they took like 3 of them apart on me. They have to be totally taken apart, re-cleaned, recalibrated, and put back together. After that, you just can't open up something that goes in an aircraft and send it back out. It's refurbished is like brand new. That instrument has to be just like a brand new one. But you're using some of the old parts, and it's at the discretion of the technician whether you change some O-rings, anything you see in the instrument that you don't like, you change it. And then it goes in the bill. They get an estimate. They okay it. Most of them were under contract. But I just wanted to show you. Yeah, I did use this as a C-clamp as a kid. This is the exact one too. I keep this as a keepsake. I use these when I'm really lazy. All right. Right now that should go to 0. All right. When you close it, you rotate this dial. Wonder why it's. Wow, that went way out. Anyway, you rotate the dial and 0 it up. That's the calibration. And the electronic ones, after they're closed, you make sure they 0 out on the digit. I have a Harbor Freight, like $15 digitals. They're really good. Oh, excuse me, I burped. I think that's it. All right, that's it.